An Unexpected Future by A Series on AO3. Episode 8, Chapter 8. Cooking. It's like stabbing, but productive. It turned out Five actually liked cooking, or cooking with Yamada after a restless day at least. Yamada had an interesting teaching style. Instead of doing everything himself and expecting Five to memorize his words and actions, or forcing Five to start a dish on his own and make him learn via trial by fire, Yamada did this weird combination of the two, where he showed Five what he wanted him to do, and then he let Five do it. Yamada would even take on separate tasks, as if he was a teammate rather than a commander. Sure, Yamada had forced him into an apron, and there were times where it definitely felt like Yamada was explaining things like he would to a small child, but at least that made it easier to follow and keep his uniform clean. And if there was one thing Five had been training to do, was to follow orders, even if he didn't always decide to follow them. So, he let himself fall into an easy rhythm of familiarity, doing what he was told while keeping an eye on the larger dish as a whole. Step by step, they're making something that smelled delicious. Five finally had something productive to do with both his hands and his attention, and he found himself being lulled into a state that vaguely resembled being relaxed. Halfway through, even he shed his blazer and rolled up his sleeves. Go ahead and add the broccoli, Yamada instructed, stepping back so Five could scrape the vegetables off the cutting board and into the pot. Normally, it's best to add greens like that last, so that they could taste fresh when you eat them. But we need everything soft so it's easy for Shota to eat. Five frowned to himself, the thought not even having crossed his mind that Aizawa might have new dietary needs thanks to his injuries. Though he really should have, considering that when Claus broke his jaw, everything needed to be liquefied for him. Can he even eat solid foods? Not really, but luckily for him, that's not much of a difference from his normal, Yamada said with a sly grin, an inside joke that Five wasn't privy to. We'll blend his portion. Five wrinkled his nose. The idea of blended stew not sounded particularly appealing. Yamada laughed. Don't worry, the rest of us will be getting the full stew experience, with extra rice, just for you. Five's face burned, glancing at the rice cooker that had been right in front of his face earlier, and he hadn't known. Yamada moved over to the sink. Could you bring over the knives and the cutting board? We'll clean everything up while we're waiting for the stew to finish. Five did as he was told, and with minimal instruction, Five helped dry the dishes after Yamada washed them. Yamada smiled at him. So, what did you think of your first proper cooking experience? It was more engaging than I expected, Five admitted. I didn't realize how long it took. I probably wouldn't make something so complicated if it was just for me. Five leaves out the fact that it was never supposed to be just him. He was part of a set of seven, and he shouldn't be needing to learn how to cook at all. Hate to break it to you, but stew is one of the easiest things you can make, Yamada said. You just throw ingredients into a pot and voila. Five's frown deepened, but Yamada just laughed. Okay, so you're probably not destined to be a professional chef, but that's not a bad thing. You're better at cooking than you were this morning, right? Wasn't that a concept? That being better could be prioritized over being perfect. There's certainly that. Five agreed, the cloth in his hand stilling, as he looked at his reflection in the knife's blade. He stared at it for a beat too long before settling it aside. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. I'll admit, the thought that I may someday be teaming up with heroes other than my siblings never crossed my mind. But, given the circumstances, it would be a good idea for me to reevaluate the way I think about certain things. Yamada looked at him, eyebrows raised. Is that your version of an apology? I don't know if I'd go that far. Five said quickly, but it is a resolve of sorts to do better. Promise? Yamada offered forward a fisted hand, pinky extended towards Five. Five looked between Yamada's hand and his face, brows furrowed. What is this? A pinky promise. Yamada explained cheerfully. It's a thing over here. If you mean what you just said, you just hold your hand up like this. Five eyed him suspiciously, not sure if Yamada was fucking with him again, but cautiously mirrored Yamada's hand. I promise. Yamada hooked his pinky around Five's and repeated a surprisingly morbid child's rhyme in Japanese before releasing Five's finger. Five stared at him. What was that part about 1,000 needles and dismemberment? Yamada laughed. It's just how the rhyme goes. It's supposed to show the seriousness of the promise, to acknowledge up front that there will be consequences for going back on your word, and vow to keep the promise regardless. The words are just tradition at this point. You don't have to worry about it. Five could read between the lines, though. Even if the punishment wouldn't be the same as the rhyme, there would still be a punishment for Five, lying in the future. The problem was, Five didn't know if he lied when he made that promise. He'd done it because it was expected of him, asked of him, and because he made more promises than he backed out of that he could count. What way did a promise hold that made it in reflex? Can you start setting the table? Yamada asked as he spiced the stew. I'll get Yamada's portion ready and then wake him up for dinner. Okay. Five agreed easily, moving to pull out dishes and cutlery from where Yamada had shown him the night before. It was kind of silly, now that Five thought about it. He knew all about where to place napkins, the difference between a salad fork and a dinner fork, and the correct hand and angle to hold a knife depending on the country. And yet, Reginald never thought it was necessary for them to know how to learn to cook. How was the appearance of sophistication more important than the ability to keep yourself fed? Then again, most of their lives were about putting up appearances. A loud buzz and a catchy jingle echoed through the room, and Yamada swore, quickly turning off the blender and grabbing his phone off the counter. This had better be important. Yamada answered, his posture straightening as he took his conversation into the living room area, keeping his voice low. Five slowed down his task, listening in as he set the table for three, but he needed have bothered, unless Yamada was particularly good at subterfuge, which Five doubted. He wasn't saying anything interesting, just arguing over shifts and schedules. Once he finished his task, Five went out of his way to get cups of water for everyone. But not that stalled long enough for Yamada to finish with his phone call. There were only so much busy work Five could assign himself before his hands became idle. He needed to prove that he wasn't lying, at least long enough for Yamada to forget the promise altogether. Five eyed the blender. Should he finish the task for Yamada? No, he doubted that Yamada would appreciate Five adding a lot of noise in the background of his call. Instead, Five was drawn to the door down the hall, where he knew Aizawa was resting. He knew how dangerous it could be, waking someone, when they weren't expecting it. But Aizawa could barely move in his state. Five liked his chances of survival. Plus, he wasn't going to apologize. Five still didn't see the point of that, but Aizawa deserved an explanation, at least. Quietly, Five removed the apron from his neck, hanging it up properly before sneaking down the hall on foot. Luther liked to accuse Five of teleporting anytime, anywhere, for any reason. That wasn't true. The impression was unfolded, but regrettably, walking properly had its uses. For instance, it was quieter than a jump, so he towed his way down the hall, which was significantly harder in slippers than it was in socks or shoes, and found himself in front of the master bedroom, hand extended towards the handle. Why was he's sneaking. Yamada had told him outright the first night that he was hard of hearing as a side effect of his quirk. Five didn't understand disclosing a weakness like that, but Five would have figured it out regardless. There was no way Yamada could hear him, and even if he could, Five doubted that Yamada would scold him for this. He barely told him off when Five covered up his mistake earlier. Was he sneaking out of habit? Five shook off the thought and squared his shoulders as he pushed open the door. Unsurprisingly, the room hadn't changed much since Five snooped around in it a few hours ago. The obvious difference being the bandaged man lying on the bed, an incline-shaped pillow under his shoulder. Five barely took a couple steps into the room before Aizawa started to shift, the bandages on its face shifting to allow two red-rimmed eyes to look in Five's direction. Dinner is going to be ready soon, Five said in Japanese, just to prove that he could after his failure earlier. Aizawa blinked a couple times, scanning the room quickly, before asking, "Where's Hisashi?" "Phone call." Aizawa grunted, and impressively managed to sit up despite the poor state of his upper body. "Thanks. Hisashi talked to you?" "He did." "And?" "He gave me a lot to think about." "And?" He was looking for some sort of specific answer. Unfortunately, Five didn't know Aizawa well enough to know what exactly he was looking for. Instead, Five wet his lips and made an educated guess. "And I won't lie next time I make a mistake." "Good. See that you don't." So that was the right answer after all. Just like before, Five wasn't sure if he really intended to keep the promise. But it was interesting to see that the two of them valued honesty over their missing and destroyed property. An awkward silence fell over the two of them. Any thoughts Five made about having explained himself dying in his rising anxiety? At least Aizawa looked just as awkward, glancing at Five and then at the door, his arms shifting in their slings. It was Aizawa that broke the silence first. "Are you okay?" Five blinked. What kind of question was that? "I'm not stupid enough to hurt myself." "That's not what I meant," Aizawa said, eyeing him through his bandages. "You've been displaced into a different time and have been told to live with a couple of strangers without your old support system. I won't blame you if you're on edge or upset." Five stiffened where he stood, suddenly missing the blazer he left on the counter. He forced himself to relax his posture and focused on rolling his sleeves back down to his wrist. "It's not that different here." Five lied, because while the world was surprisingly similar, this house was as different from what he knew as things could get. "How long has it been?" "A little over 200 years. "Nothing's changed in 200 years. Five could feel the incredulity radiating off Aizawa more than he could see it, and Five just shrugged. "It's not my fault you guys didn't invest in cool tech once you got superpowers." Aizawa sighed, and for a moment, it looked like that would be the end of their conversation. But then he turned to Five again and said, "I appreciated you visiting me in the hospital." It was like Aizawa had knocked Five's legs out from under him. Five didn't waver. He was better than that. But he was quiet, a beat too long, before saying, "You don't even know me." Even still. At least Aizawa was looking properly embarrassed now, averting his eyes. It was a good distraction from the pain. Five stared at him, not sure what to do with that information. He felt oddly raw from Aizawa's admission, an open sore being prodded, and for the second time in this conversation, he missed his blazer. Instead of engaging with the contemplated tangent of emotions in his chest, Five snaps. "Do you need any help getting up or not?" Instead of answering with words, Aizawa just stood, and Five found himself wondering why they'd been having this conversation at all. Dinner's ready, Five repeated, leading the way back to the kitchen with burning ears. He was going to grab his damn blazer and not take it off for the rest of the night. God, I can't express how much I love the subtleties. Or not even just subtleties, but like, the saying what the other person wants to hear and not knowing if you truly mean your words. That specifically is a huge trauma response. It's something that I see in myself, mainly because of something that happened to me in the past. So when I'm talking to friends and they say something, I sometimes catch myself replying stuff that I don't actually genuinely mean, and I'm actually just replying something that I know the other person is going to want to hear from me, right? What they want to hear from me and stuff. And it's a trauma response because the reason why you're responding as what you want or what the other person wants from you is so that you are the perfect thing that the other person wants, and you don't get reprimanded for stepping out of that little boundary, little square that they painted you in, right? Obviously, in Five's case, it's Regnal, right? His fucking quote unquote father, his adopted father, right? He is, obviously constantly saying what his, let's just say dad, what his dad wants of him. Why? Because if he doesn't, there will be consequences. So he has learned to understand what other people around him expect him to say, expect him to do, expect him to behave. And it's that subtlety like that I very much appreciate and love. God, my voice is killing me. My voice is killing me right now, but it's not in the sense where it's like talking is hurting. Just existing is hurting. So, don't worry. I'm fine. You guys do not need to worry about me. I know I was sick the other day with my nose, and now it seems like I have a sore throat. So that's wonderful. That's amazing. I feel like I'm getting sicker and sicker. At least I don't have a stuffy nose. I think I can live with a sore throat. I just can't live with a stuffy nose. I really can't. I can't. It's annoying as fuck. It's not even just like painful. It's annoying. It's fucking annoying. Don't get me wrong, sore throats are annoying as well, but I could live with it. I could live with this. I could just ignore this. I can't ignore the fucking stuffy nose. And it always makes my lisp worse, right? With my sore throat, it does not make it worse. In fact, I think it, it doesn't make it worse, it doesn't make it better, it's just there. It doesn't affect me. But my stuffy nose does fucking fuck up my fucking lisp. Like a lot. Oh, I got a text message. Who is it? Oh, wonderful. Nobody. It's a spam text message. We love that. We love not getting text messages. I have friends. I don't text my friends. My friends don't text me. We have lives. Welcome to adulthood. Adulthood. Fuck. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.